Does this sound familiar? You start a brand new piece and you're really excited about it, but then you get frustrated and bored because the progress is slow. Or maybe you can play a lot of pieces, but none of them really well. If you can relate, then you're probably struggling with bad practice habits. Today, I'm going to share with you some effective practice strategies that work really well for myself and for my students so that you can learn your pieces quickly and master them so that your playing really improves. I'm going to walk you through learning a new piece step by step so that you can apply the same structure to your practice sessions. Hi, I'm Heather from Brillante Piano Duo. It's been so rewarding to read the comments from you on our videos. Some of the common questions that we see are, when should I start worrying about the rhythm when I'm learning a new piece? And when should I learn the pedal and the dynamics? Well, stay with me today because I am going to answer those questions along with some valuable bonus tips throughout. The first step to learning any piece is to practice it hands separately, very slowly, counting out loud while observing the fingering and the articulations. We're creating habits on the first day, so it's really important to be practicing and hearing the piece as accurately as possible. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. So I'm counting with the metronome to keep my counting steady. A lot of students count unevenly and they're not aware of it, and then it ruins their rhythm. I'm also careful to observe the staccatos and the slurs and the fingering. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1. I know what you're thinking. Heather, how can I count out loud when I'm struggling just to play the right notes? Well, my response is that most of what you practice should be at a level where you can play hands separately and count out loud pretty well on the first day. Occasionally, we stretch out of our comfort zones and try difficult pieces that we can't do this on the first day. If that's the case, then practice hands separately slowly without counting, and then once you can play the notes pretty well, then add the counting back in. Another idea for these difficult pieces is to try the SpeakBeat Metronome app. It's one of my favorite apps that I've talked about in a lot of my other videos. If you're struggling to play and count at the same time, you should really give this app a try. It counts for you and it works incredibly well for my students, even on the first day. So I'll link that app in the description below. After you can play hands separately well while counting or using the SpeakBeat metronome, it's time to start learning hands together. And usually at this first stage of learning hands together, it's difficult to count and use the metronome. So don't worry about that here, but just make sure that you're continuing to practice your piece hands separate while counting so that you're hearing the rhythm correctly every day. Before you start playing hands together, I'd like you to break your piece up into some small sections and try to keep phrasing in mind when you're creating these sections. So my first section should be this first phrase. After you've marked some sections in your music, then play each section hands separately, then hands together several times slowly. Don't move on to the next section until you can play the first section perfectly several times in a row. If you're making mistakes, that simply means you're playing too fast. Don't be like most pianists and practice fast and sloppy. You're actually wasting your time and creating horrible habits when you practice like this. It takes so much time and effort to fix wrong notes and bad habits. So do yourself a big favor and don't practice like this. If you find yourself continuously rushing, turn on the metronome to keep your practice slow and clean. I want to pause for a moment and ask, what do you really struggle with in your practicing? What videos could we make that would really help you? We love to hear from you. After you can play the notes pretty easily hands together, then start practicing the sections hands together while counting with the metronome or using the SpeakBeat metronome for a surefire way of learning the rhythm correctly. While you're practicing hands together, there will be places that you stumble and hesitate, and most of us want to ignore these places, but actually most of our practice time should be spent on these spots. So here's a bonus tip. When you first open up your piece, start right on the treble areas. The longer we sit at the piano, the less motivated we are to work on the problems. So start on them first while your mind is fresh. After you can play your piece clean, hands together with the metronome, it's time to turn off the metronome and work on the details and the dynamics. So some people will say that you should start learning the dynamics right away, but I disagree. I find that students usually will make a lot of mistakes on the notes and the rhythm if they're focusing on too many things at once. So I have my students usually wait to learn the dynamics, and I definitely have them wait for the pedaling. It's really helpful to isolate and focus on one new detail at a time. So for example, play the piece hands together slowly with the pedal and don't worry about the dynamics. And then also practice the piece with the dynamics without the pedal. And then eventually you'll be able to put the two together. Here's another bonus tip. When you're adding the pedal, practice the hand that is controlling the pedal changes separately before pedaling hands together. Here's a bonus tip for fast technical pieces. After you've worked it up to the top speed, it's really important to continue to practice at slow or medium to keep our playing clean. Use the metronome to work on evenness and to stop yourself from rushing. I want to encourage you to continue to practice regularly at this stage of learning your piece. We all get bored of our pieces, but try to remember that when we challenge ourselves to play our pieces up to the top speed with the details, the dynamics, and the pedaling, our playing really improves. One thing that you can do to stay motivated at this stage is to listen to professional recordings of your piece. You'll probably get really inspired to try some new things, and you'll definitely learn to play more expressively. Here's another bonus tip. When I feel like I've mastered a piece, I'll record myself on my phone, and then I'll listen as I watch the music. This is so insightful, and it usually motivates me to stick with the piece a little bit longer until I sound the way I truly want to. All of these steps and strategies that I've talked about today may have left you feeling like practicing is labor intensive and too time consuming. So I want to encourage you to watch this next video of mine where I talk about time maximizing practice strategies if you're short on time and what you should really be practicing to see real progress.